Welcome to the Summer of Woo, you radiant brightlings. This season, the show that wildly recognizes, encourages, and invests in the radiance we all carry is casting a light on all things mystical. By tapping into the magic in and all around us, we'll better connect to our individual and collective sacredness so we can shine our brightest. Join us in this 6-episode mini season as we open ourselves up to mystery and woo.
Woo!
Woo!
Okay, so our last episode was I titled it Reclaiming Ritual, and then in hindsight, a day after it posted, I realized we didn't really talk about ritual. We talked about
No, we did talk about ritual because we talked about how we wanted to have more ritual. Yes.
It was more the need to reclaim than if someone was like, hey, I want more ritual in my life. It's not really going to tell you what ritual to do, but we started on it. So this is like a to be continued. Because
it is.
We were starting to have a good conversation. Well, first, I was feeling like a poser. You reminded me. But then when we were kind of talking about how to be sustainable in our practices, I think we've also kind of, in addition to a huge part of sustainability isn't necessarily routine or the same thing, but doing what you need. And so recognizing I need ritual in my life, but that ritual is going to match what my capacity and my need is in order to be sustainable.
Yeah, I love that. I also think that sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves to create some kind of, almost like here, let me get a wedding organizer, a ritual organizer to help me create the most elaborate, beautiful ritual that ever did ritual.
It's not even having the book of, oh, what is it? All I can think of is the show on the WB. I can't actually think about what the book is called. What did they have on Charmed? Not a book of, it was a book of
Book of Shadow.
Book of Shadow, right? So for me, it's not even that I have a book of shadows. I'm project managing my ritual, right? I have spreadsheets, I have a Notion app, I have to-do checklists, and it's so much of what gets in my way of starting a new ritual is wondering if I'm doing it right, or and we've talked about this in the past before. There are, when you look to people online, when you look to influencers, they can be a great guide and a great introduction and a great idea generator. But there's often too many rules for an intuitive practice. Even all of these books that we've mentioned and stuff like this, to me, you just be a filter, not a sponge, right? Take what you need, take what resonates, takes what feels good, as long as you're not doing harm or getting, into stuff you don't have any business being in. But yeah, too often what prevents me from even doing a ritual or starting a new practice is what do I do? And we both shared last episode that we are feeling more called or drawn to working with our ancestors, but we're both new to it.
Yes, but you shared an article that was in
NPR.
Yes, that's right. And how to make an ancestor altar. And we were going to share it. So did you share it?
I did.
Oh, you did.
I shared a whole bunch from the creator, but we can share it again this week.
Okay.
Too. Yeah,
okay.
It was in our story.
Yeah, awesome, Amy, for knowing that Tracy had shared it. Whoopsies.
Well, you've already read it. I texted you.
Well, I did read it, and it did inspire me to do it. And I feel that I was inspired to do it probably because it was NPR and not like someone who I was like, I love this person, and they're so spiritual and they know so many
it's things. Not a live journal article from 2007.
Well, I don't know. It's just, it felt like I didn't have to be something I wasn't in order to do it. I didn't have to go out and collect sacred objects from I don't know who. What I did do, so it felt very comfortable and comforting to start it.
Do you think that's because a lot of it's ancestors, so you're connecting with ancestors. So it's going to be hyper personalized from the get, right?
But yet I've wanted to do one for a very long time, and something has always stopped me. And it is that pressure that we put on ourselves. Oh, I don't want to do it wrong. What if what if I upset my ancestors? What if I upset the balance of something? I don't know. And yet I know that the ancestors I did know in real life would have been like, what do you mean wrong?
I was just gonna say, what would happen if you upset your ancestors? Because all day, the past 2 hours from when I texted you, hey, we still on? Can we do this? To now, I had that Mulan song, like,
Yes,
ancestors, hear my plea, help me not to make a fool of me.
yes.
And
And
not
remember, she
disappoint
did
my
kind of upset
family.
them.
But my ancestors, especially the ones I've met, are you're too serious, Tracy. And like, I'm the most, like, I would be the judgmental ancestor, I fear. And the people I'm calling in or calling out to or that I'm connecting with are not going to care, right? Like you just said, like they would say, whatever, Amy, wrong.
Yeah, yeah. And I also believe that just starting out, just doing it, like there were many times that I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to do this thing. And like literally, and I'd say it out loud too.
Yeah.
So but the
See,
key point for me was how comforting it was and still is. It's right next to me. and 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 now I feel very perceived.
Ooh, and that's a huge part. The creator that inspired all this, she does a lot of work with ancestors. I'm totally spacing on her name. Again, we'll post her on Instagram, and I talked about her in the last episode, but she talks about how you have to open yourself and allow yourself to be perceived in order for your ancestors or anyone to help you. And how
And that,
hard
yeah,
is that?
well, my goodness. But I think that we just go around like thinking that here I am. Of course, they're all around me or they see me, or maybe you don't think anything about your ancestors. I don't know. I feel like once I didn't lose them. They died. Once my dad died, I mean, my grandma and grandpa died, and yes, that was sad, but I didn't think, oh, I need to be able to talk to them. Um, my dad died, yes, I would talk to him. When my mom died, it felt like once she died, then it was like, I need to reconnect to all the
Mm,
ancestors. And then I started thinking about all the people who I never met. I never met my dad's parents. They were dead before I was born. I never met my dad's sister. She was dead before I was born. And so that's when I was like, there are ancestors out there, and these are people that I could have potentially met. Then you start thinking about the ancestors. I have people who, lived and died in Yugoslavia, right? So then it's almost like, wow, I have a network of ancestors.
well, apologies if this cheapens everything you just beautifully shared. But as you described your network and how far back you could go, I just immediately pictured Buffy the Vampire Slayer connecting to the first Slayer, right? And just
Oh
going
my
back to the
God.
first Slayer and just thinking of like, how far back can you connect? And how similar are you in any ways to those ancestors? I think about that all the time. Like, there's this picture of my grandma and her two sisters when they're in their 20s, and we know exactly who each of those people are. They look very similar in their youth to, as they did just before they died. But there's a fourth woman in it. Definitely looks related. And I didn't know who it was. So on social media, I commented like, "Oh, who's the, like, oh, it's Betty and so and so and so and so. Who's this fourth person?" And someone commented, "Your sister?" And it could have been. My sister hadn't been born for another 40 years, but it totally could have been her.
Wow.
Right? And so I wonder, like, there's that old saying, I don't know if it's part of, is it Japanese culture, where they say your face is the one of the person who loved you the most in the prior lifetime, right? But like I also think of that genetically, like my face probably looks like someone that I've never met before. And what was their life like? And what did they have similar thoughts to me, right? Like my mom tells me all the time there's certain things I do that grossly remind her of my father. I can't pick them out. If I could, I would. She is so there's like mannerisms and little things we do and little things we say. And is it stuff I learned from him? I would think I would notice if I was doing it, if it was learned, or is it just like in my code? Is it right? Are there other
Right.
ancestors who did this?
Right. Ooh, I mean, this is sort of like mind-boggling in a way because you could just go as deep and deep and deep. It's amazing. I can remember every once in a while it would be typically like if I'd be wearing a hat or something, my dad would just look at me and go, "Oh, you look like," and he'd call her Burr. I don't know why he called his sister Burr. Her name was Adele. Um, and but he said, "You look just like Burr right now." But sort of like he said it in a way like, "Oh, I can't, you're making me sad. You look like her," because he
Mm,
had already lost her. But and I'm a kid, right? And apparently I was some kind of not curious kid, or else was taught that you don't question these things
sure.
because I didn't ask him anything about her. And now I regret that because she was kind of a mystery and a little bit of a scandal well, a big bit of a scandal in the family.
Oh God,
And
now I want you to connect. I want to know what her deal was.
well, and then that was, we found um, relatives, cousins, like 5, 6 years ago, who reached out to us on my dad's side. We're like, we did not know you existed. And their mother was Adele's daughter.
Yeah.
So their mother was so not to get into
Right. But
relatives, but still, it's mind blowing.
well, but that's what started this whole ancestral journey for me was over Memorial Day weekend. I mentioned something about our Uncle Mark. And my 10-year-old nephew was like, "Who's that?" And granted, it's Memorial Weekend, right? So you do want to like talk about the people who have passed and remember them, right? And honor them. But also, it's a barbecue and he's 10. Like, how much of a bummer do you want to be talking about people who died?
Oh, golly.
And when I was just a little bit older than him until my 21st birthday, we had a whole bunch of death in our family, some really young, some expected. And so my sisters and I have a much different kind of like reaction to it, or we probably talk about it a little bit more openly than I think some people are accustomed to, or I feel like I do sometimes. And so I'm overly cautious of that with this new generation who hasn't had any loss yet, knock on wood. But so my older sister, I was so shocked and surprised, and I love this. She took out a piece of paper and she drew a family tree so that he could understand who Mark was in relation to him, in relation to Nana. She started talking all about him and his fiance. I mean, I think what I had kind of shared or what I had kind of realized when, what brought it up was I am now going to be older than he ever was. And that shortly after he passed, a few years after he passed, one of my mom's birthdays was really hard for her, and she shared that that was why. And I had never thought about that before, right? That what must it be like to live on this earth longer than a sibling, longer than a parent at a young age? And so now I'm like, this is crazy. I was like 13 when he passed, and I'm now older than he got the chance to be. And so then that made me start to think about my other family members and then other ancestors. And like, it's so funny you thought, like, oh, what if I do it wrong and upset them? When I think about doing it wrong, I think about it not working. The only thing I think about is like whether or not I'm bothering them. Like I think I should, right? Like, do they
Oh,
want
I
to be
thought about that
bothered?
too. And yes, so when I did my little, I'm not going to say exactly what I did, but I cleaned the space, literally cleaned it. I gathered the photos and little mementos that I have. I placed them where I thought it seemed appropriate. And then I lit a candle. Well, I did do some incense and then I lit a candle. And then I basically was just like, hi, not like,
Hello.
so I've gathered you all here today. I didn't do that, but I did, not that I prayed to them, but it was like I was like saying, I want to honor you like this. I want to acknowledge you. It, so it was more kind of like that, an acknowledgement and an honoring. And then I sat with them and had my coffee, and it was just kind of like a little like hi.
Well, and I
It
think that's
literally
such a
was that.
it's such a great example of ritual overall, but especially for the ancestor work. It's your intention. I think that's what all of this comes down to is what is your intention and are your actions or behaviors in line with that intention? So I think the only way you could do it wrong is to not know what you want or what you're trying to get out of it, right? So like for you to just be like I want to honor you, I want to spend time with you, right? Like you had an intention in mind.
Yes, I
And
did. And I also opened it up to ancestors who were not represented because I might not understand how to represent them. And so I did say to ancestors, seen and unseen, known, not known, so I did open it up that way as well.
The one
Something,
the one thing I've taken from the little bit I've learned from other classes that have incorporated calling in ancestors into whether it's a guided meditation or some sort of ritual in a group is just to always add who are interested in my highest good. I call in the ancestors who are interested
hey,
in
y'all.
my highest good and the highest good of all concerned, stuff like
Okay.
that, right?
Yeah, I
Like
should have added that.
I knowing you, I think that intention is always present in your aura, in your surroundings, and in your work. But if you're nervous or wondering or unclear, I always love tacking that onto whatever I'm doing. That this isn't a gossip sesh. This isn't a tell Tracy what's wrong with her life and to do things better. We can have those chats later when I'm in the car, whatever. But like right now I have this intention and I only want to call in those who share that intention with me
Yeah,
or
really
better.
good point. The other thing that I'm thinking about right now is I probably could have, and I will do a formal sort of closing out, like, thank you, you can rest now, I'll see you tomorrow kind of thing. Maybe not that casual, but I,
Peace.
yeah, peace out. But I also did say I'm going to meditate now, and I'm going to meditate. If you have anything you want to share with me or tell me, this would be a
I
good time.
the little bit I have kind of like looked into it, and I mean other stuff we've been talking about deities this year and some other things, but before you sleep, ask for them to come to you in a dream with a message.
Okay, well, someone did come to me in my meditation, and she has actually come to me in my meditation before, but I had never looked at her as an ancestor, and I now believe she is.
Oh, what makes you
Yes,
think that?
I just do.
A
And
knowing, an
then
inner knowing.
an inner knowing, and then she like greeted me and had me come in this house that she's had me come in before. And then she shared these seeds with me, almost sort of like they reminded me of like a pomegranate seed, but they weren't a pomegranate. And she called them a certain thing. I'm not going to say what it is right now because I'm having a hard time. Nanchki, something like that. And as she was sharing them, she ate some and I ate one. It was like I could feel you know how sometimes you have a fruit that is a little bit sour and you can feel that in your jaw. And then my mouth started to water while I was doing that. And I'm eating it. And I said, "What are these for?" And she said, "So you can know things." I'm like, okay.
I like her. Have you, one of the things some of my spiritual coaches or guides, mentors have said is you can ask them, similar to asking your guides, for their name, right?
When I first met her a few years ago, I did ask her name.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. So I do have that. And I even looked up what the name, because there were two names. There was a like almost like a first name and a last name. And I looked up what they meant. I can't remember it right off the top of my head. But it's it's one of those things where you're like, I want to put it depends on where you are on the belief spectrum, right? I believe this. And I believe when I heard the name that was given to me, that was because there are many times when I am, meditating and somebody's saying something to me and I can't understand it. And I've even said, I need you to speak so I can understand. That's the other thing that you can do too, is just to say, can you please tell me things so that I'll understand it, or show me signs so that I'll understand it.
Yeah, I usually if I see things, it's like a flip book. It's going way too fast. And it's
Yes.
a lot of things. And so like, because I've had to like go and take a nap before because it's like, this is too much information. And then it stopped. And then someone was like, just tell them to slow down. And I was like, oh, I got overwhelmed and just was like, I'm done. Bye. Right? Like this is really cool, but like this is like physically all of my senses are engaged and I don't know why. Thoughts and prayers. Bye-bye. And someone's like, did you ask him to slow down? And I was like, oh. Like you assume this interdimensional being who's already figured out ways to connect with me, they should know. They should know.
It's like my husband. I'm over here going, you don't know how I feel. You don't know that I want you to go to the store and get me this thing. And no, he doesn't. And neither do they.
Well, now I wonder, is like, God, like, I wonder if I talk too fast for them. Is this, are they just like mimicking what I'm throwing out in the world? Do I have too many intentions going out, right?
Tracy, I know that you're being funny with that, but I actually think that that's a really good point, that you also could ask, how would you, how would you like me to communicate with
Ooh.
you?
Yeah, I mean, that was a half joke. Like part of me is serious. Like I do believe
Yeah.
I'm probably, with my ADD and how my brain works, I think I'm just projecting all the damn time and they're just like giving it back. But I love not only asking them for their name, but instead being like, what do you want to be called? How do you, I do this with my tarot cards. How do you want to work together? What are you good for? What are you not? Right? Like,
I know we do an introduction to we do that all the time, and yet I didn't do it today. So I will. Here's the thing with this, though. The next time I sit down to have a ritual with them, that's what I will do. I will add that in. It's not like I'm going to beat myself up for not doing that today. And that's the whole thing. I think that, like, it has taken me so long to just try things and try them the way that feels right to me, and not the way that's written in 17 different books. And trying to discern which one is the right way.
yeah, I mean, there's some like opening invocations to things where they've included like, and I open to the winds of the north, to my ancestors, the healer, blah, blah. And so some of that I'm like, can't think of anything else to say. So I do like that, is like, I like formalizing it a little bit to get my brain and my body to like acknowledge, but you could really say anything, right? So like, I love that you're kind of tailoring it to what you're doing in the moment.
So I will say, I'm glad you brought that up, because I did kind of forget about that, because I reset my center altar as well, which represents the north, east, south, west, with elements that represent those things as well. And so I cleaned that off. And as I was resetting it, I did call out to each one. So that did kind of formalize the process. And like you said, when you do formalize it, you are sort of resetting your brain and your body into something that says, oh, okay, we're going to do a ritual now, or we are doing a ritual now. But you said something earlier when you said it comes down to intention. And I feel like anything we do, of course, any habit we have, if we intentionalize it and maybe formalize it just a little bit, that's a ritual.
I also think, you know, whether it's intention or being really formal or like having like a ritual you do, it's also a form of protection too. I have been told by some of my readers and stuff like that. Like one of them, she's like, "Oh, this area in your house that you don't call it your altar to other people, but it's like your altar and it's where you do everything and you do like your kundalini there and you meditate there." And it's like, yeah, because I do have a formal altar that I call and I treat as such. But I also have a different space in my house that I prefer to use because directionally it's just perfect, a better window, more open space and all this. She goes, "Yeah." She's like, "Nothing malicious or bad, but it everything you're doing is attracting this other stuff, these other energies, beings, entities, right? And they just hang out in this corner." She like described some lights that I had up. She hasn't seen my house, right? Like she hasn't seen this stuff. And she just kind of described like what they liked about it and then like told me what I could do to like if they want to stay, great. But she's because I was like, no, I don't feel affected by them. I don't feel affected, you know. It was like, you know, that's not like where my gifts are. I don't really, you know, like I don't sense that. Like if you don't sense anything malicious, they can hang out. I don't care, right? Like I don't, that's not where my power and my interests lie. And she goes, "Do you ever have those days where like you just like suddenly out of nowhere are in a terrible mood and it just goes on?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "That's some of them." And she's like, "Do you
Oh,
ever like
okay.
some of these moments and stuff?" And so I've also learned that more formalizing it, but again, not following what other people do, but like taking what I've done in other areas and ways also helps to like make me feel like I'm in a little like bubble while I do this stuff, right? And
Yeah.
that it's just me and whoever I'm trying to work with. Um, and so doing things like doing like you said, you're going to close the space, right? Like there's an opening and a
Mhm.
closing that I feel like really help ground and center the work.
You know, this is a little bit off topic, but you took me to a Kundalini class once.
Yes.
Yes. And it was quite intense. And we opened up our third eye and then we did, what was it, frog? I don't
Yep,
know. I
frog.
can't
That
remember. For like,
I took you on a day where we did the most difficult, hated, annoying thing, and you did it.
but here's the thing. I opened my third eye. I never closed it. I
Yeah, you
never
were a
formally
buzz all
closed
day,
it.
weren't you?
And then I actually, it was either later that day or it was the next day. I was with my sister and I had such a headache and I didn't feel good. And she thought it was because I was vegan.
I
And
remember you
then
talking like
I,
you had like a migraine, right? Like you
yes.
just didn't feel
And then I
good.
finally realized I never closed my third eye.
And that's exactly what I was saying with like after it's typically after a Kundalini yoga class when I'm all of a sudden getting all sorts of stuff. And like I have a hard time opening to that degree. And so I feel reticent to close stuff all the way. Like I like just being all out there. I'm overly grounded. I'm an earth sign, right? But it's so overwhelming.
Yes. And typically I am pretty well grounded as too. But for whatever reason, this time it just affected me to, and thankfully I finally figured it out that oh, I need to close that. Okay, third eye, you can have a little shut eye now.
Thank you, next.
So that is just a little reminder of the importance of if you're going to open something, you need to close it.
Well, and like you said, letting them know the work is done, right? Not that they
Yeah, that
can't.
they can rest.
Yeah.
Because I think I already said this once before, but the dead want to rest as well. So I
Well,
think that's something important to remember.
well, that's always been my hesitancy whenever I have done something where they open up to the ancestors where I'm like, oh man, but nobody current, right? Like nobody I've met. Like take a break, right? Like it hasn't been very long. Like
Yeah.
you don't have to. Like you've given me wisdom. I met you.
I'm talking
Right.
ancestors.
But then you shared your mom came through and was like, I'm ready for you to use me now.
She
Um
did.
and
Yes.
she passed
Yeah.
relatively recently in
Well, recently
this
is
decade,
relative, right?
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. So recently is relative, and you're right. It was in 2019 she passed. But knowing my mom and you knowing her adjacently, 4 years is long enough for her. And so she's like, I'm ready. I'm ready to help. You need to ask me for help. And she was clear on that as well. Like, okay, you need to ask me for help. Um, and in fact, it was my daughter who she was like, yep, tell Jackie. And of course, then I tried to get in on the action as well. But I didn't ask for, the lottery numbers. I just asked for determination. So
Well, and why limit yourself to just winning the lottery? I would say, hey, help me in all financial avenues, right? Like maybe you got an
exactly.
ancestor who's good at saving a buck. I'll take that. I do feel though, like you made a good point. I think another thing, if you're doing a ritual, it's also important when working with other energy, right? Like if it's not just you and what you're going to be sitting and doing, that you have to ask. That is one thing that I've been learning that's been fairly consistent among all practices is you have to be very specific and you have to ask and give permission in a sense. Cuz who would
Yeah,
want
those are
their
two different things, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
because I don't know that if when my mom passes in 100 years, I don't know if I'd want her making decisions for me without consultation. And so I understand, I appreciate the boundary, energetic boundary of like, we need to work together and to ask for support and clarity and guidance, right?
But I do think I also like it that is, yes, ask for help and also give them permission to help you. And it is two different things because sometimes I think people might think, well, if you're asking for help, aren't isn't permission implied, but not necessarily. And I do think it's good to have that kind of fail safe in there as well.
Well, it
So
kind of
I
goes
like
to that
that.
perception piece, right? Like I have to
Yes,
be perceived, I have to let them really see me.
yes.
I have to let them know what I'm working on, what my intent is, what my ask is, and then I have to say, If you can help me, please do." Right? Like I'm
Yes.
I'm open to assistance, I'm open to guidance. What is it that you're looking for from them? I think I mentioned last time the more the practices I do that I feel like I get the most out of are the ones where I've been the most specific. The ones where I'm just very
Yeah.
broad and I don't even know what I want. I think that's a form of not being perceived, right? Like if I can't perceive what I want, how can something else? So you gotta kind of know some stuff.
That is such a good point because I feel like I was not specific. This was sort of just an opening invitation, an opening introduction or
You had an
reintroduction,
open
so to
house.
speak.
It was a meet and greet, Amy. Some of these people you haven't met before, right? Like
But, I didn't set parameters. It was just like, come anytime and stay as long as you want.
I I like that. I might do that. I don't know. Right now, my intention is just to connect. I think that's kind of where you were too, where
Yeah.
it's like, hey, think this might be supportive. Maybe I'll just ask who thinks they can help, right? Like who wants to connect with me? Um, One thought, I know we don't have a lot of time left, but one thought I just had was, what kind of ancestor do you think you'll be?
Tracy, I was thinking of that earlier when you were talking, you were saying something, and I was going to ask you, what kind of ancestor do you think
I
you'll
wanted
be?
to say it earlier, but I was like, now's not the
Yeah,
time. Like, it's off topic,
no,
but like, we're
yeah,
gonna be ancestors someday. How cool!
yes, yes. I am going to be an absolute wild ancestor and so much fun. And I will help people with like how to, hmm, well, I'm going to think about that. What kind of ancestor are you going to be?
Just really supportive. I don't know. Like, I feel like a medium. Like, oh God, if anything happens to me, like Nova, Gabe, Aiden, like all the littles.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, feel
exactly.
feel free. Auntie's still around. Like, you don't have to wait 4 years. You don't have to wait for me to tell you I'm ready. But then there's just like there's this thing that's like, hey, if you knew where you could if you knew where you were gonna go and you knew that you were going, and like viruses, disease, any wouldn't matter. Would you rather go 1,000 years in the future or 1,000 years in the past? And I just think
Oh,
about like, oh, once I'm an ancestor, I can do both. Like, I don't.
yeah, yeah. If I don't know if you can you hear a knocking?
No, but I
It's
can imagine who's at your
yeah,
door.
yes, yes. If you, I can hear you. We're still recording. I'm almost done.
um, I I have so much to learn and do from this.
Yes,
Is
yes,
I loved what you showed me earlier. It's like you said, it's to your side, so you can't really show us, but you have a nice little grid where it is, like you said, it's the directions. I noticed feathers, which is something that like everything that I think of when I think about rules around ritual, it actually it's like amping up your antenna, right? Like my TV works just fine, but if I move my antenna this way or if I add on this thing or whatever, I get a better connection. And so there
yeah,
are like certain crystals, feathers, and just like mementos, right? Like if you do know
hmm,
someone, you want to like just feel their presence more, which I think is a
yeah.
great idea.
And I will share a photo of this in our
I was just gonna
stories.
ask if you're gonna do
Yeah,
that. Mind
yeah,
meld.
yeah. I will. All right. Well, wonderful conversation. I feel like we could just continue on with this, but certainly if you're listening, continue the conversation with someone you know. If this episode wasn't too woo woo for you, or was maybe just woo enough, please spread the woo with a friend. We'd appreciate you wooing us with some love on your preferred platform with a rate, review, and subscribe. You can also reach out to us via Instagram and YouTube under The Brightly Podcast or via email at brightlypodcast@gmail.com.
You said that so beautifully. And Amy, I tried to email us something this weekend and it bounced back because I got it backwards. I did the wrong one. How often do we say this and do I listen to it? But so please email us. We even email ourselves. Email us about your ancestors, who you're connecting with, or even on social media. We'd love to hear what your rituals are or things like that. And again, we'll share all this on our Instagram page. So if you don't follow us, please do. And with that, we hope you have a bright and magical day.